The evolution of Easter eggs in Call of Duty Zombies. Today, the Easter egg, or main quest, is inseparable from Call of Duty Zombies. New maps are judged by the quality of their quest, the strength of their boss fight, and how satisfying the ending feels.
No! 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 No!
Entire communities organise around solving them. Streamers race to be first. Developers design maps with the assumption that players will tear every inch apart, searching for hidden meanings. But that relationship between the players and the Zombies content did not exist at the start. In fact, Zombies was never meant to support something like this at all. When the mode first appeared, it was a bonus, a surprise unlocked after completing the World at War campaign, an Easter egg in of itself. There was no long-term plan, no overarching narrative bible, and certainly no intention for Zombies to become a puzzle-driven, story-focused experience. It was a simple survival mode, built quickly by a small team who were experimenting more than they were planning. And yet, hidden inside that simplicity was the seed of everything that came after. To truly understand the evolution of Zombies' Easter eggs, you have to stop thinking about them as quests right away, because early on, they were not quests. They were curiosities. Small, optional secrets placed into a mode that did not slow down, did not explain itself, and did not care whether you found them or not. That contrast is the key to why Zombies' Easter eggs worked when they could have just as easily failed. And nowhere is that clearer than in its genesis, Nacht der Untoten. Nacht der Untoten is as close to a blank slate as Zombies ever gets. There are no named characters, no Coca-Colas, no Pack-a-Punch, no objectives beyond survival. The map itself is tiny, almost claustrophobic, with just enough space to kite zombies and not enough space to ever feel safe. The entire experience is built around repetition: kill zombies, rebuild barriers, accumulate points, die, repeat. It is intentionally bare bones, and that simplicity is why the hidden elements stand out so strongly. Scattered around the map are several red barrels. They do not glow. They are not highlighted. They do not draw attention to themselves in any meaningful way. But if a player shoots all of them, something unexpected happens. Music begins to play. There is no message on screen, no audio cue telling you what you did. The game does not acknowledge your success in any traditional way. It simply changes the atmosphere. The match feels different now, more alive, less repetitive. There is also a radio that can be shot to trigger additional tracks from the game. Again, no explanation, no hint, just an interaction that exists quietly, waiting for someone to stumble into it. On paper, these are tiny additions. They do not affect gameplay balance, they do not make survival easier, they do not advance any story. But they establish a design philosophy that Zombies would lean on for the next decade. The game contains secrets that exist entirely outside of the core loop, and more importantly, it never tells you they are there. At the time, Easter eggs were not new to games. Developers had been hiding jokes, references, and secrets for years. Even World at War's campaign included an Easter egg that let players unlock the ray gun. What made Zombies different was the environment that these secrets were placed into. Zombies is loud, chaotic, relentless. The mode actively punishes hesitation. Standing still gets you killed. Wandering aimlessly gets you trapped. The game trains you to focus on survival above all else. And yet, Nacht der Untoten asks you to notice details anyways. It asks you to shoot objects that do not matter, to experiment, to break from the optimal survival mindset just long enough to discover something optional. That tension between urgency and curiosity becomes the defining trait of Zombies' Easter eggs. Finding a secret in Zombies never feels safe. It feels earned. What is especially important here is that none of this was framed as a quest. There was no beginning or end, no sense of completion, no narrative context. These secrets existed purely as rewards for engagement. They were there for players who stayed long enough, played enough matches, and paid enough attention to their surroundings. Looking back, it is easy to treat Nacht der Untoten's Easter eggs as primitive or insignificant by modern day comparisons, but in many ways they are the purest expression of what Zombies' secrets were meant to be. Optional, hidden, unexplained. The player was never meant to feel guided, and that idea would shape everything that followed. In the next maps, Treyarch would begin to experiment with structure. They would add patterns, atmosphere, and eventually story implications. But the core rules established in Nacht never went away. Zombies' Easter eggs would never announce themselves. They would always require players to look where the game told them not to look, in a mode that never stopped trying to kill them. And that philosophy carries us directly into Verrückt, where those small secrets begin to feel darker, more deliberate, and more unsettling.
Great! Power's out!
Verrückt is where Zombies' Easter eggs begin to feel intentional rather than incidental. Nacht established the idea that secrets could exist quietly inside of the mode, but Verrückt starts to formalize how these secrets work and what purpose they serve. The musical Easter egg returns, but this time it follows a recognizable structure. 3 toilet seats must be activated to trigger the song. That detail matters because it introduces pattern recognition as part of discovery. Players are no longer stumbling into a single hidden interaction. They are being taught, subtly, that one strange object might imply the existence of others like it. This simple repetition becomes the foundation for almost every Zombies Easter egg that follows, where discovery leads to suspicion, and suspicion leads to experimentation. At the same time, Verrückt introduces something arguably more important than structure, which is intent. The dentist chair Easter egg is small and easy to overlook, but it represents a major shift in philosophy. Activating it produces nothing useful. There is no weapon, no power boost, no score bonus. Instead, the map fills with the sounds of drilling and screaming, implying horrific medical experimentation carried out in this space before the outbreak. This moment exists purely to make the environment feel wrong. It gives the location a history that players were never meant to witness directly. For the first time, Easter eggs are being used to imply story rather than just reward behavior. Zombies is no longer just a place where something bad is happening. It is a place where something bad already happened. What makes this especially effective is how vague it all still is. Verrückt never explains who was experimented on, who conducted the experiments, or why they happened. There is no named villain, no defined organization. The lack of clarity is part of the design. These secrets do not exist to inform the player, they exist to unsettle them. Easter eggs at this stage are not telling a story so much as they are planting questions, and that sense of unease becomes one of the defining emotional tones of Zombies moving forward. NUMA builds directly on this idea, but shifts the focus from environment to character. This is the map that introduces the original crew, and with them, the first real sense that Zombies has protagonists rather than just avatars. Each character has a distinct voice, personality, and presence, and that alone changes how Easter eggs are perceived.
Does that turn you on?
Secrets are no longer just tied to locations, they are tied to people. Hidden inside of one of the huts is Richthofen's journal, journal. Interacting with it triggers a distorted, almost gleeful laugh that echoes across the swamp. Mechanically, this is still a very simple Easter egg. There are no steps to follow, no follow-up reward, and no clear explanation of what the journal contains. But narratively, it is a massive step forward. This moment implies that Richthofen has been here before, that he left something behind, and that whatever he is involved in has already begun to affect his sanity. For the first time, an Easter egg hints at motive. What is important here is restraint. NUMA does not explain Richthofen's plan. It does not frame him as a villain or a hero. It simply gives the player enough information to realise that this character knows more than he lets on, and we should be suspicious. Looking back, this journal becomes one of the earliest breadcrumbs leaning towards the Ether storyline as we understand it today. At the time, it functioned as a mystery with no solution. Players could sense that it mattered, even if they had no way of knowing why. Together, Verrückt and NUMA represent a transitional phase in Zombies Easter eggs. They are no longer purely novelty secrets like the music in Nacht der Untoten, but they are also not yet quests. There is no progression, no escalation, and no sense of completion. Instead, these Easter eggs exist to enrich the world. They give locations a past and characters a future. They encourage players to read into details, to speculate, and to talk to each other outside of the game. This is also where the community aspect of zombies begins to take shape. Because these secrets do not explain themselves, discussion becomes part of the experience. Players compare notes, share theories, and try to piece together meaning from fragments. Trick is not telling a story directly. They are letting players assemble one themselves, even if that story is incomplete. By the end of NUMA, Zombies Easter eggs have evolved from hidden distractions into narrative tools. They still do not guide the player, and they still do not reward mystery, but they have acquired purpose. They're setting the stage for something larger. The next map would take that foundation and push it further, transforming implication into revelation, and laying the groundwork for would eventually become the first true Zombies quest. And that brings us to RIESE.
Power levels critical.
Power's out. Let's get turned back on.
RIESE is the moment where Zombies Easter eggs stop feeling abstract and start feeling deliberate. Everything before this map laid groundwork, but RIESE is where Treyarch clearly realizes the potential of what they have been building. This is the map where implication turns into confirmation, where atmosphere gives way to narrative, and where Easter eggs begin to resemble something closer to a quest, even if they are not quite there yet. By the time players reach RIESE, they are already conditioned to expect secrets. They know to shoot strange objects, to listen for audio cues, to question why certain things exist in the environment. RIESE rewards that mindset by hiding its Easter eggs behind a sense of progression. You do not stumble into it early. You must first engage with the map, open it up, and unlock Pack-a-Punch. Only after completing what feels like the map's natural endpoint does the game quietly suggest that there is more. Outside of the facility, players can shoot a glowing light near a Stonehenge structure. Doing so activates what would later become known as the Flytrap Easter egg. From here, the map turns into a game of hide and seek. Small objects around the map hide themselves, and players must find and shoot them while the demonic announcer reacts in-game. Once all of them are found, she declares victory with the now iconic line. On the surface, this Easter egg is almost anticlimactic. There is no weapon reward, no power boost, no permanent unlock. But the importance of the Flytrap has nothing to do with what you gain and everything to do with what it confirms. The demonic announcer has become more than an abstract voice. She is aware of you, she is playing with you, and she reacts when you complete her game. This realization becomes far more disturbing when paired with the radios hidden throughout RIESE. These audio logs tell the story that previous maps only hinted at. Through audio recordings, players learn about Richthofen's betrayal of Ludwig Maxis, the murder of his daughter Samantha, and the death of her dog Fluffy. The implication snaps into focus. Samantha's soul is bound to the ether. She is the announcer. She is controlling the zombies. For the first time, Zombies Easter eggs deliver a coherent narrative revelation, rather than just fragmented suggestions. The story is still hidden, still optional, and still never explained outright by the game, but it is now unmistakably there. Players are no longer theorizing blindly, they are uncovering facts. RIESE also establishes a critical structural idea that would shape future quests. Easter eggs do not interrupt the core gameplay loop, they sit beyond it. You survive, you progress, you master the map, and only then are you invited to look deeper. This reinforces the idea that Easter eggs are for invested players. They are not tutorials or onboarding tools, they are layers added on top of mastery. Another subtle but important shift happens here. The Flytrap Easter egg introduces interaction with the announcer as part of gameplay. This is the first time a Zombies Easter egg feels like a conversation rather than a one-sided discovery. The map acknowledges your actions, it responds. That feedback loop becomes essential to how future quests communicate progress. RIESE is also where the community truly begins to understand that Zombies has an ongoing storyline worth following. The radios are cryptic, but they are concrete. They name characters, they describe events, they establish cause and effect. From this point forward, Easter eggs are no longer just fun secrets to show friends, they are primary sources of narrative information. In hindsight, RIESE feels like the prototype for everything that follows. It introduces step-based progression, narrative payoff, environmental storytelling, and direct interaction with a guiding presence. It does all of this without calling itself a quest, and without ever placing a marker on the player's screen.
I miss my wife.
Hi guys, Mr. Ruffalo.
This balance between subtlety and significance is why RIESE stands out so strongly in the evolution of Zombies' Easter eggs. It proves that secrets can carry story weight without sacrificing mystery. It shows that players are willing to work for answers, and most importantly, it demonstrates that Zombies is capable of telling a story entirely through hidden content. With RIESE, Trek crossed an invisible line. Easter eggs were no longer experiments. They were now an essential storytelling tool. The next step was inevitable. If secrets could carry this much meaning, what would happen if they were given more space, more steps, and more structure? That question would be answered soon.
Maybe someone should go turn on the power now!
KINO the TOTEN is an unusual but important stop in the evolution of Zombies' Easter eggs, largely because of what it does not have. There is no main quest, no multi-step secret, no hidden narrative payoff waiting at the end of a long process. And yet, KINO the TOTEN plays a crucial role in shaping what Zombies would become. The most likely reason for the absence of a quest is practical rather than philosophical. KINO was originally envisioned as a finale-style DLC map for World at War Zombies, before being pushed back into Black Ops 1. By the time it resurfaced, much of the development effort was likely focused on porting the map forward, updating systems, and ensuring it functioned properly within Black Ops 1 rather than expanding its scope. In that sense, KINO exists slightly out of time. It carries the DNA of an earlier era while releasing into a game that was already moving forwards. Even without an Easter egg quest, KINO's impact is significant because it standardizes structure. RIESE introduced a progression loop that players immediately latched onto, and KINO reinforces that loop so thoroughly that it becomes the default expectation for Zombies maps going forward. You spawn into a contained starting arena, you explore outwards, you locate and activate the power, and once power is on, you work towards unlocking Pack-a-Punch through some form of spatial or mechanical interaction. The sequence becomes second nature to players, and KINO is the map that teaches it to an entire generation. For many players, KINO is their first Zombies map. It does not overwhelm with complexity. It does not demand puzzle solving. Instead, it trains instinct. Players learn what progression feels like. They learn that power is a turning point. They learn that Pack-a-Punch is the ultimate goal of setup. In doing so, KINO quietly locks in the RIESE formula as the new standard. Even without a quest, the map conditions players to expect layered progression rather than static survival. Zombies is no longer just about lasting as long as possible in a single space. It is about opening the map, restoring functionality, and accessing promising deeper systems. KINO also reinforces another subtle expectation. Not every map needs an elaborate Easter egg to be satisfying. Strong flow, clear progression, and a memorable atmosphere can carry an experience on their own. This matters because it gives Treyarch flexibility. They can choose when to escalate and when to consolidate. In retrospect, KINO feels like a pause, a moment where Zombies catches its breath after Der RIESE before taking its next major leap. It does not move the Easter egg concept forward directly, but it ensures that the foundation those Easter eggs are built on is solid, intuitive, and universally understood. That stability is what allows Ascension to push so hard in the next step. Once players are comfortable with the core structure of a Zombies map, Treyarch can afford to ask more of them, and that is exactly what happens when Easter eggs return, bigger and more demanding than ever. Ascension is the map where Zombies Easter eggs take a decisive step forward and cross into something new. Everything before this point feels like experimentation, like Treyarch gradually testing how much story and structure players are willing to engage with. Ascension is where that uncertainty fades. This is the first time an Easter egg is designed to be long, difficult, and unmistakably intentional. Even if Treyarch still referred to it internally as a side quest, the scope of what players were asked to do tells a different story. The most immediate change with Ascension is scale. The Easter egg is no longer a short sequence hidden behind the natural endpoint of the map. It is a multi-step process that unfolds over the course of an entire match. Steps must be completed across different areas, often under pressure, and with precise coordination. This is also the first Easter egg that hard requires 4 players, locking solo and smaller groups out entirely. That decision would become controversial later, but at the time it reinforced an important idea. These secrets were no longer meant to just be stumbled upon. They were meant to be solved deliberately. Ascension also introduces a design element that becomes foundational going forward, which is the presence of a guiding character embedded directly into the quest.
She's coming. The mechanism must be repaired.
Gersh, trapped within the Casimir mechanism, speaks to players throughout the Easter egg. He reacts when steps are completed correctly, offers vague guidance, and acknowledges progress. This changes how players interact with Easter eggs on a fundamental level. Instead of wondering whether something worked, the game now tells you, albeit indirectly. This feedback loop creates momentum and gives the quest a sense of direction that previous maps lacked. For the first time, an Easter egg feels like a conversation between the player and map, rather than a one-sided act of discovery. The announcer still exists, but Gersh provides a counterpoint. He is a victim rather than just a manipulator, and his presence reframes the story. The ether is no longer just a mysterious force. It is something that traps, corrupts, and distorts people. Ascension uses its Easter egg to deepen the cosmology of zombies rather than simply adding more lore. Fragments. The reward for completing Ascension's Easter egg is also a milestone, even if it did not age particularly well. Players receive an extended death machine, marking the first time an Easter egg completion provides a direct gameplay advantage rather than a purely narrative payoff. In theory, this is a logical step. In practice, it reveals a flaw in how players actually approach zombies. Most teams would complete the final steps while holding a crawler to stay safe. By the time the next round began, much of the death machine's duration was already wasted. This moment becomes a quiet but important lesson for Treyarch. Zombies players value permanence. Temporary rewards do not align well with the slow, methodical nature of Easter egg solving. This realization would heavily influence how future quests were designed and rewarded. Ascension also subtly reshapes the community's relationship with the zombies. Solving this Easter egg at launch was not only a personal achievement, it was a collective effort. The complexity of the steps encouraged theory crafting, collaboration, and shared discovery. The Easter egg hunt itself began to dominate the conversation around new map releases. The act of solving became content. Even with its flaws, Ascension represents a clear philosophical shift. Easter eggs are no longer side curiosities layered on top of survival. They are now large-scale undertakings that demand planning, communication, and time. The mode has quietly moved away from pure endurance and towards intentional progression. Trick may not have fully realized it yet, but Ascension is the point where Zombies begins to expect players to finish something rather than simply last as long as possible. And once that expectation exists, it becomes impossible to walk back. That expectation would be refined and improved almost immediately with the next map. Call of the Dead feels like a direct response to the lessons learned from Ascension. Where Ascension pushed ambition and complexity, Call of the Dead focuses on refinement. It asks a simple question: if Easter eggs are going to demand this much effort, what should players actually get in return? The answer is permanence. Completing Call of the Dead's Easter egg results in changes that persist beyond the current match. Killing George Romero now unlocks the Wunderwaffe, permanently altering his drop table, replacing the death machine with a far more useful reward. Richtofen players receive the Golden Rod, an item that carries forward into future maps. These rewards respects players' time. They acknowledge that solving a complex quest should have lasting impact. This is a crucial step in the evolution of Zombies' Easter eggs. The game begins to recognize that quests are part of a larger progression, not isolated challenges. Players are no longer just completing an Easter egg for bragging rights or story clarity. They are unlocking advantages that shape future experiences. Call of the Dead also addresses one of Ascension's most criticized design choices: accessibility. Instead of a single 4-player locked Easter egg, this map introduces 2 distinct versions, one for solo players and one for cooperative. Each has its own achievement, and the co-op version only requires 2 players. This opens the door for a much larger portion of the community to engage with the story content without forcing artificial constraints. Narratively, Call of the Dead continues to push Easter eggs forward as connective tissue between maps. At the end of the quest, the original crew teleports away, and players hear ambient jungle sounds echoing in the distance.
All in good time, my clever Dutch. All in good time.
This is one of the first deliberate teases of a future location delivered through an Easter egg. The other probably being the rocket launch Easter egg on KINO the TOTEN teasing Ascension, as well as the future maps on the wooden board in RIESE. The story no longer resets with each map, it moves forward. This forward momentum changes how players think about zombies. Easter eggs are no longer isolated mysteries, they are chapters. Completing one creates anticipation for the next. The hunt extends beyond the current map and into speculation about what comes after. Call of the Dead represents maturity. It keeps the scale introduced by Ascension, but grounds it in player-friendly design. It rewards effort with permanence, expands access, and strengthens narrative continuity. By the time players finished this Easter egg, it was clear that Zombies' quests were no longer experiments. They were now a core pillar of the mode. And with that foundation firmly in place, Treyarch was ready to refine the formula further, pushing replayability and payoff even more with Shangri-La.
We have arrived. This is the place we're supposed to be. Oh, and we need to turn on the power.
Shangri-La arrives at a moment where the Zombies Easter egg formula is largely established. Ascension proves that large-scale quests could exist, and Call of the Dead showed how to make them more rewarding and accessible. Shangri-La does not attempt to radically change that foundation. Instead, it focuses on refinement, replayability, and reinforcing the idea that Easter eggs are meant to be engaged with repeatedly rather than treated as one-time accomplishments. Structurally, Shangri-La's Easter egg feels familiar. It is multi-step. It requires coordination, and it ties directly into the map's central mechanics. But the key difference is how it treats completion. Rather than offering a single permanent unlock that applies forever, Shangri-La allows players to repeat the Easter egg multiple times within the same match. Each completion grants a single player access to the focusing stone, which in turn provides permanent perks for the remainder of the game. This design choice subtly shifts player motivation. The Easter egg is no longer something you finish and then ignore. It becomes part of your long-term strategy. Players who master the quests gain a tangible advantage that directly impacts how long they can survive. Mastery and replayability are now linked. Shangri-La also reinforces the idea that Easter eggs should feel integrated into the map's identity. The quest is tied closely to the environment, the eclipse mechanic, and the overall theme of ancient power and cyclical time. While the narrative implications are not as explosive as previous maps, the sense of cohesion is strong. The Easter egg feels like it belongs here rather than being layered on top. At this stage in Zombies' evolution, that cohesion matters. Players have come to expect that the Easter egg reflects the map's tone and mechanics. Shangri-La delivers on that expectation without trying to escalate the story further. In many ways, it feels like Treyarch consolidating what they have learned before, attempting something bigger. And that bigger step arrives immediately after.
must be the place where they bake all the apple pies.
Moon represents the culmination of the original Zombies' Easter egg philosophy. Everything Treyarch experimented on with across World at War and Black Ops 1 converges here into a quest that is larger, more dramatic, and more consequential than anything that came before it. From the moment players set foot on Moon, the scale feels different. The environment is surreal and hostile in new ways. The low gravity changes how players move. The threat of decompression adds constant tension. Even before the Easter egg begins, the map signals that this is a place where the rules are different. The quest itself reflects that ambition. The steps are complex and intertwined with core mechanics, but what truly sets Moon apart is how it treats narrative progression. For the first time, a Zombies Easter egg has a clear midpoint that feels like an ending. When Richtofen swaps bodies with Samantha inside of the MPD, the announcer changes, the zombies' eye colour shifts, and an achievement unlocks. In any previous map, this would have been the conclusion. Here, it is only the beginning. This moment is crucial because it directly involves the player in a permanent narrative shift. The Richtofen player is now inhabited by Samantha's soul. The voice guiding the game changes. The world feels altered. The eyes shift from yellow to blue. The story does not simply advance around you, it advances through you. The second half of the Easter egg escalates both mechanically and narratively. More steps, higher stakes, greater coordination required, and finally, an ending that redefines the scope of the zombie story entirely. The destruction of the Earth is not a background event or a forced cutscene. It is the result of player action. The consequences are enormous, and they are impossible to ignore, all absorbed from your in-game perspective. Moon also redefines what an Easter egg ending can be. It does not wrap things up neatly. It ends on a cliffhanger. The story is left in chaos with no immediate resolution. This choice fundamentally changes how players think about zombies' narratives. Easter eggs are no longer self-contained arcs, they are chapters in an ongoing saga. In retrospect, Moon feels like the natural endpoint of the Black Ops 1 era. It takes the subtlety of early maps, the structure of Ascension, the permanence of Call of the Dead, and the replayability of Shangri-La, and pushes them all to their logical extreme. There is nowhere else to go within that framework without changing the rules, and that is exactly what Treyarch chooses to do next. With Black Ops 2, the philosophy shifts. Rather than escalating scale again, the focus moves towards player choice, branching outcomes, and the idea that Easter eggs can represent conflicting perspectives rather than a single canonical path. This shift begins with TRANZIT, and it marks the start of a very different era for Zombies quests.
Repairing this location should take no time at all for Marlton, dun dun dun, engineer of destiny.
TRANZIT marks the first major philosophical shift in how Zombies' Easter eggs are designed. After Moon, Treyarch had reached the ceiling of the Black Ops 1 quest structure. The story had escalated to an almost absurd scale, and the idea of simply making the next Easter egg bigger was no longer sustainable. Instead of escalation, Black Ops 2 experiments with divergence. For the first time, players are asked to choose. TRANZIT introduces two mutually exclusive Easter eggs, one aligned with Ludwig Maxis and one aligned with Richtofen. Both exist within the same map, both require discovery, and both present conflicting outcomes. Once players complete one path, the story does not end. The other path still exists, unsolved, inviting continued investigation. This fundamentally changes how the community engages with Easter eggs. Solving is no longer about reaching a single answer, it is about uncovering all possible answers. This design aligns perfectly with how the Zombies community had evolved by this point. Easter egg hunting had become an event. Players collaborated across forums, YouTube, and live streams, sharing findings and debating interpretations. TRANZIT leans into that energy by ensuring that no single solution satisfies the entire mystery. Completion breeds more questions rather than closure. Mechanically, TRANZIT's Easter eggs are complex and often unintuitive, reflecting the experimental nature of the map itself. The open world structure, the bus system, and the fog all work against clarity. This friction makes solving the Easter eggs feel arduous, sometimes frustrating, but also deeply communal. Progress is slow, information is fragmented, no one solves everything alone. Narratively, the choice between Ludwig Maxis and Richthofen reframes the story as a conflict of ideologies rather than a linear plot. Each side presents a different vision for the future, and the game refuses to immediately tell players which one is correct. This ambiguity fuels discussion and speculation, reinforcing the idea that Easter eggs are now the primary way Zombies tells its story. Transit also reflects a growing awareness from Treyarch that Easter eggs are no longer optional curiosities. They are now the focal point of a map's lifecycle. Players expect them, they anticipate them, and they are willing to spend weeks tearing maps apart to understand them. Transit designs around that expectation, even if the execution proves divisive. Die Rise continues the dual Easter egg structure introduced in Transit, but it also exposes the cracks in that approach. On paper, the idea remains strong: 2 opposing quests, 2 outcomes, continued narrative ambiguity. In practice, the map struggles to support that ambition. The Easter eggs in Die Rise follow a similar structure to Transit, with Maxis and Richthofen once again offering competing objectives. However, the steps feel more rigid and less inspired, and the vertical layout of the map often works against clarity and flow. Progression feels less intuitive, and the sense of discovery that defined earlier quests is diminished. This highlights an important lesson in the evolution of Zombies' Easter eggs. Complexity alone does not guarantee engagement. When quests become too opaque or mechanically awkward, they risk alienating players rather than inviting them in. Die Rise feels like Treyarch trying to keep pace with an idea that's outgrown its initial implementation. Community reaction reflects this tension. While the dual path concept remains compelling, enthusiasm begins to wane. Solving the Easter eggs feels more like obligation rather than exploration. The hunt continues, but the excitement is muted. Despite its shortcomings, Die Rise plays an important role in the broader evolution of Zombies. It represents the moment where Trey begins to recognize the limitations of branching quests without strong narrative framing or satisfying payoffs. The idea itself is not abandoned, but it becomes clear that it needs refinement. Zombies is at a crossroads. The mode has grown beyond a simple survival, but its identity feels unstable. Players are invested, but divided. The next map would need to re-establish confidence, not by adding more complexity, but by redefining what a Zombies Easter egg is meant to feel like. That redefinition arrives with Mob of the Dead.
What the fuck is going on? Where is everybody?
Mob of the Dead arrives at a moment where Zombies desperately needs clarity. Transit and Die Rise pushed experimentation, player choice, and large-scale ideas. But they also left many players feeling disconnected. The mode had grown complex, yet unfocused. Easter eggs were harder to pass, harder to complete, and harder to care about emotionally. Mob of the Dead does not try to outdo those maps in size or complexity. Instead, it commits fully to a singular vision of what a Zombies quest should be, and in doing so, it fundamentally reshapes the future of the mode. From the start, Mob of the Dead feels different. The setting is grounded, grim, and immediately understandable. Alcatraz Island is a real place with a clear identity, and the map leans into that heavily. You are not dropped into an abstract facility or an apocalyptic wasteland. You are trapped in a prison, playing as criminals who are already dead. That clarity matters, because it allows the Easter egg to function as a story rather than a puzzle box. For the first time, the narrative is not hidden behind vague audio logs or implied details. It is front and center. The characters speak constantly about their situation, their past, and their relationships to one another. The Easter egg does not exist alongside the story. It is the story. Every major step reinforces the themes of guilt, punishment, and cycles of violence. Even the map's core mechanics, like Afterlife mode, are tied directly to this narrative framing. This is also where flow becomes a defining design principle for the Zombies quests. In Mob of the Dead, players are almost always moving towards something meaningful. Collecting plane parts is not a side task. It is how you reach Pack-a-Punch. Building the plane is not busy work. It is progression. The Easter egg steps are woven so tightly into the map structure that engaging with the quest feels natural rather than optional. You are rarely standing around waiting for the game to let you continue. Another major evolution here is the introduction of a true win condition. Completing the Mob of the Dead Easter egg ends the story. There is a conclusion, a revelation, a final choice. The cycle is exposed, and the characters are confronted with the truth of their own existence. This alone is revolutionary for zombies. For years, survival had been the only endpoint. Now, finishing the quest feels like finishing a narrative arc. Mob of the Dead also reflects significant behind-the-scenes changes. The map is directed by Jason Blundell, with several members of the campaign team stepping into Zombies' development. That influence is immediately visible. The storytelling is cinematic. The pacing is deliberate. The Easter egg is structured like a 3-act narrative rather than a collection of obscure steps. This is not accidental. It represents a philosophical shift in how Zombies content is designed. Quality of life improvements reinforce that shift. The buildable system is streamlined, allowing players to carry multiple parts and reducing tedious backtracking. Friction is intentionally removed so that players can focus on decision making and execution rather than memorization. These changes may seem small, but they drastically improve how it feels to engage with a quest over a long session. Community response reflects how impactful this map was. Mob of the Dead restores confidence. It shows that zombies can evolve without losing its identity. Easter eggs no longer need to be obtuse to be engaging. They can be clear, thematic, and emotionally resonant. Many players look back on this moment as the beginning of a golden age, not because the maps suddenly became easier, but because they became more intentional. Mob of the Dead proves that Zombies' quest can tell a story while still rewarding mastery and discovery. It does not abandon complexity, but it gives that complexity purpose, and once that template exists, it becomes impossible to ignore. The maps that follow would build on this foundation in different ways. Some would expand it, others would try to balance it with older ideas, but none of them could return to the aimless ambiguity of the earlier era. The next step would be to reconcile Mob of the Dead's focused storytelling with the branching, long-term narrative Black Ops 2 had already committed to. That reconciliation arrives with Buried. Buried arrives in a strange position. It comes after Mob of the Dead, a map that redefined what Zombies Easter eggs could be, but it belongs to the Victor's storyline that began with Transit and RIESE. As a result, Buried feels caught between two identities. It is clearly an attempt to correct the problems of Black Ops 2's earlier Victor's maps, but it cannot fully escape the design philosophy that created them in the first place. On the surface, Buried is more welcoming than its predecessors. The layout is clearer, the tone is lighter, and the map is packed with mechanics designed to reduce frustration. Arthur can open paths, move obstacles, and assist with tasks. Buildables are easier to manage. The overall experience feels smoother and more playful. In many ways, Buried is Treyarch acknowledging that Transit and RIESE ask too much patience from players and offering a more approachable alternative. The Easter eggs reflect this same philosophy. Once again, players are presented with two opposing paths aligned with Maxis and Richtofen. This time, however, the structure of both quests is far more similar. Rather than wildly different sequences, the two paths mirror each other closely, suggesting that Treyarch had already identified how inefficient and confusing truly divergent quests could be. This makes Buried's Easter eggs easier to understand, easier to complete, and easier to discuss. Buried also introduces the first true super Easter egg in Zombies. By completing all of the Victor's Easter eggs on the same side, players can activate an endgame scenario using the endgame button. This adds a layer of long-term progression that encourages players to revisit the earlier maps, coordinate with friends, and commit to a particular narrative alignment. It is a smart idea, and it succeeds in giving the Victor's storyline a sense of cohesion that it previously lacked. However, despite these improvements, Buried still feels like a step backwards in the broader evolution of Zombies' Easter eggs. The quests are more functional, but they lack the narrative focus and emotional weight that Mob of the Dead introduced. The story exists, but it does not drive the experience. The Easter eggs feel like objectives to complete rather than stories to inhabit. This contrast is especially noticeable because of where Buried sits in the release order. Players had already seen what Zombies could be when a map committed fully to a singular narrative vision. Returning to the Victor's structure, even in its most refined form, highlights its limitations. Choice remains central, but the consequences feel abstract. The story advances, but it does not resolve. Buried is not a failure. In fact, it is arguably the best execution of the Victor's formula, but it also represents the end of that approach. The improvements it makes are real, yet they feel incremental rather than transformative. It becomes clear that Zombies needs a new default, one that builds on Mob of the Dead rather than circling back to earlier ideas. That new default arrives immediately after. Origins is where zombies hits a reset button, just like the name suggests. While Mob of the Dead proved that a focused, narrative-driven Easter egg could work, Origins takes that philosophy and applies it to the main storyline itself. This is not a side story or a stylistic experiment. This is the foundation for everything that follows. From this point forward, Origins defines what a map is expected to be. One of the most important changes Origins introduces is how completely the Easter egg is integrated into the core experience. The quest is no longer something you opt into after mastering the map. It is the spine of the map. Major systems and upgrades are locked behind quest progression. Building and upgrading the elemental stats is not optional side content. It is essential to do basically anything. The Maxis drone, G-strikes, and other powerful tools are earned through deliberate engagement with the map's deeper mechanics. This integration fundamentally changes player behavior. Instead of asking whether they want to do the Easter egg, players are encouraged to ask how efficiently they can do it. Progression and mastery becomes intertwined. Learning the quest is learning the map. Origins also dramatically increases the amount of side content available. Smaller Easter eggs and mini quests are scattered throughout the map, each offering practical rewards. This creates a layered experience. Players can focus on the main quest, chase specific upgrades, or simply survive using the tools they have unlocked. Depth becomes a defining feature. The complexity of Origins is intentional, and it is divisive. The map demands time, planning, and repetition. There is a significant upfront learning curve. For casual players, this can feel overwhelming. For dedicated players, it is deeply addictive. Mastery feels earned rather than given. Each successful run feels like a demonstration of knowledge rather than luck. Narratively, Origins also serves as a reset. The map reframes the story, introduces new versions of the familiar characters, and establishes a new baseline for the Ether narrative. This is beyond a continuation. It is a recontextualization. Players are told implicitly and explicitly that what came before is being reshaped. Most importantly, Origins proves that Mob of the Dead's design philosophy can scale. A zombie's quest can be cinematic, mechanically rich, and deeply integrated without sacrificing challenge. The Easter egg is no longer just the story, it is the experience. From this point on, zombies will be built around this expectation. Maps will be judged by just how well they integrate quests, how meaningful their upgrades feel, and how satisfying their endings are. The reset is complete. The new default is set. With Origins, Zombies does more than evolve, it commits. From this point forward, fully animated CGI ending cutscenes are to be expected. Origins also previews the first, technically, final boss fight of the game as well, when you have to survive in the crazy place. The narrative is front and center just as it was in Mob of the Dead, with Samantha constantly talking to you throughout the map even if you are just normally playing. You cannot escape the main quest. It is everywhere, bold and bright, and that commitment carries us directly into Black Ops 3, where this formula is expanded, refined, and pushed to its limits.
You bear the mark. You are cursed. You must kiss your hand upon the stone.
I don't think this is a dream.
Shadows of Evil is the first map to fully inherit the legacy of Origins without compromise. This is no longer a transitional experiment or a hybrid of old and new ideas. This is Treyarch committing to a clear identity for zombies moving forward. One where the Easter egg is cinematic, mechanically central, and inseparable from the map's identity. From the moment Shadows of Evil begins, it is obvious that this is a different kind of experience. The map is dense, stylized, and dripping with personality. The characters are sharply defined, the setting is theatrical, and the tone is deliberately noir. Just like Mob of the Dead, the story is not hidden away. It is present in dialogue, cutscenes, and moment-to-moment gameplay. The Easter egg does not exist in the background. It is the narrative engine driving everything forward. Structurally, Shadows of Evil refines the Origins approach. The quest is layered into progression, with rituals, upgrades, and unlocks that feel like natural extensions of the world. Each character is given focused attention through specific quest segments, reinforcing the idea that zombie stories are now character-driven rather than purely mythological. This creates a rhythm to the Easter egg, where each section feels distinct but cohesive. The introduction of a boss encounter at the end of a quest marks another important evolution. While the Shadowman boss fight is relatively simple compared to what would come later, the idea itself is transformative. Zombies Easter eggs now end with confrontation. This is a sense of climax rather than quiet completion. The story builds towards something tangible, something that must be overcome. Shadows of Evil does make a misstep though, because you do need to be in a 4-player game in order to complete it due to the final shock step. This was always a mistake since Ascension, which they course corrected with Call of the Dead, but then fell back on with pretty much all of the subsequent quests until Origins, requiring multiplayer play. However, Origins was different because you were able to complete it solo, albeit it would be a lot more difficult. But I believe Trek never actually intended Origins to be played solo, but it became a massive success with people grinding it out solo and being able to have the luxury of doing so, which is something they would strive for with all maps going forward. But for some weird reason, they chose to go back on this with Shadows of Evil, making it very unique from all of the maps that were to come. And clearly a mistake, since they never gated it behind multiplayer play ever again since then. Even though the boss itself does not fully live up to the Shadow Man's narrative presence, the pattern is established. Quests will end with spectacle. The Easter egg is no longer just about solving steps, it is about surviving a final test. Shadows of Evil sets the tone for Black Ops 3 as a whole. It signals that the era of subtlety is over. Zombies is now confident in its storytelling, and Easter eggs are the primary delivery system.
Our fragile alliance holds steady.
Der EISENDRACHE is where the Black Ops 3 formula truly finds its footing. It takes everything Shadows of Evil established and expands it, refining the structure, the pacing, and the payoff. If Origins set the new standard, Der EISENDRACHE proves that the standard can be polished into something widely beloved. The return of the elemental wonder weapons feels familiar from Origins, but the execution is smoother and more deliberate. Building and upgrading the bows is intuitive while still demanding mastery. Each path feels distinct, and each reward feels powerful. These upgrades are not optional flourishes, they are tools designed to prepare players for what comes next. The next step is the boss fight. The Keeper boss encounter at the end of Der EISENDRACHE is longer, harder, and more mechanically demanding than anything zombies had attempted before. For the first time, failure at the very end means losing everything. There are no checkpoints, no safety nets. This is a bold design choice, and initially it almost feels unfair, but it works. The intensity of the fight transforms the Easter egg from a puzzle into an endurance test. Completing the quest feels like an accomplishment rather than a checklist item. The risk makes the reward meaningful. From this point on, boss fights are no longer novelties, they are expected, and they become one of the defining features of Zombies quests. Like I said before, this quest can also be done solo or with any other number of players. This cements how they would be integrated in the future too. Der EISENDRACHE cements the idea that Zombies Easter eggs are meant to challenge even experienced players. Mastery is reward, but it must be earned under pressure.
I'm sorry, I don't speak Japanese.
ZETSUBOU no SHIMA is where boss fights stop being escalation for its own sake and become a structural requirement for the quest itself. After Der EISENDRACHE proved that players were willing to risk everything on a difficult finale, ZETSUBOU no SHIMA takes a different approach. Instead of saving its major encounter for the end, it embeds a boss fight directly into the core progression of the Easter egg. The Spider Queen is not optional. Defeating her is mandatory, as she drops a critical component required to continue the quest. This is an important shift. The boss encounter is no longer a climactic test reserved for the finale. It is now a gate. Progress is impossible without overcoming it. This design choice fundamentally changes how players approach Zombies quests. Boss fights are no longer something you prepare for once everything else is complete. They become obstacles that must be handled mid-run, often before players feel fully equipped or comfortable. This reinforces the idea that Easter eggs are meant to pressure players, forcing them to engage with the map systems earlier and more deliberately. ZETSUBOU no SHIMA leans heavily into preparation and environmental mastery. Power, water systems, plant growth, and resource management all feed into quest progression. The Easter egg demands patience and familiarity, and the required spider boss fight serves as a checkpoint that tests whether the team is truly ready to continue. You cannot brute force your way through it without understanding the map. While ZETSUBOU no SHIMA is often remembered as slower and more demanding than the other Black Ops 3 maps, its contribution to the evolution of Easter eggs is significant. significant. It normalizes the idea that boss encounters are not just spectacles, but mechanical necessities. From here on out, Zombies' quests are comfortable forcing players into high-risk scenarios well before the ending. In many ways, ZETSUBOU no SHIMA represents the formula settling into place. The structure established by Shadows of Evil and EISENDRACHE remains intact, but the expectations are sharper. Engagement is no longer optional. If you want to see the story through, you must prove you can survive its most dangerous moments along the way. Narratively, there's a shift as well, where post-ending cutscene we have a tangent to the Alcatraz Island, bringing back the blood vials that now appear on the characters' models. It's a subtle little clue, showing that completing these quests can add little nods to the future of the story indirectly, without being plastered so front and center. This also helps to loop back Mob of the Dead to the overarching story. This makes the escalation in the next map feel natural rather than excessive. By the time KROVI demands multiple boss encounters in succession, players have already been conditioned to accept that difficulty and danger are now baked into the DNA of Zombies' Easter eggs.
Curse you, dragon! Hey! Other soldiers! Identify yourself!
KROVI takes that comfort and pushes it towards excess. Everything about this map is built to feel intense. The setting is hostile, the enemies are aggressive, the quest is relentless.
We can disarm it, Alex. Help me.
Yeah.
Cut the wire exactly when I say, not before.
Just
Green
like
wire.
goggling
In
balls.
3, 2, 1.
The Easter egg follows the established pattern, but its defining feature is escalation. Instead of one climactic boss fight, KROVI delivers two back to back. First the dragon, then the mech. This is not subtle, it is spectacle driven by design. At this point in the evolution of Zombies' Easter eggs, escalation has become part of identity. Each map is expected to push a little further, hit harder, and test players more severely. KROVI embraces that expectation fully. The result is a quest that feels exhausting in the best way possible. Completing it is an endurance trial that reinforces the idea that Zombies' quests are the ultimate expression of player skill. Revelations is the final map of the Black Ops 3 Ether storyline, and it approaches its Easter eggs from a different angle. Rather than pushing the formula forward, it spreads outwards. The map is a collage of past locations, mechanics, and ideas, and its Easter egg reflects that philosophy. The quest itself does not introduce major new mechanics. The boss fight reuses the Shadow Man concept from Shadows of Evil. In some ways, this feels like a step backwards, especially given what came before. The ending lacks the same sense of escalation and finality. However, Revelations compensates with breadth. The map is packed with side quests, activities, and optional content. There is always something to do, something to chase, something to optimize. The Easter egg becomes one piece of a much larger playground. It is also worth noting that Revelations was developed under significant time constraints. Leaked developer materials suggest that the original scope of the quest was far larger than what ultimately shipped. Understanding that context reframes some of its shortcomings. I have discussed these core concepts in more detail in previous videos linked on screen and in the description. Revelations does not redefine Zombies' Easter eggs. Instead, it closes a chapter. By the time Black Ops 3 ends, the formula is fully formed. Cinematic quests, integrated progression, boss fights as finales, depth layered on top of depth. The evolution that began with hidden music in Nacht der Untoten has reached its most elaborate form. And that's why Treyarch tried to do something different with Revelations, with a weird rock step, etc. They very deliberately created a very drawn out Easter egg hunt, because it was the closing chapter of the Ether saga. I mean, it literally says the end at the end of the ending cutscene, even though we knew we were going to go to the Broken Cycle next. It very much was marketed as the end of Zombies. And so they wanted the hunt to be as prolonged as possible. And whilst many people criticize the hunt for this reason, I actually think it was a smart choice from Treyarch, and I wouldn't have it any other way. It's good for us to get at least one map like this to see how the community would react, and I think it was timed perfectly with Revelations being the closing chapter of the Ether saga and its cycle. It wouldn't have worked with another map, but a 10-day hunt is something completely unheard of, and it literally had people watching live streams hunting it, getting hundreds of thousands of views. That to me suggests success. All eyes were on the hunt. People may think the hunt is annoying in retrospect with how random the steps were, but like I said, it got eyes on the mode. It got people invested, and no other hunt has ever been anything like it, and it will never be anything like it again. So whilst the hunt itself I wouldn't say is an evolution, it's just different, one that I don't ever think should be replicated. I think it served its purpose for this specific scenario. And from here, everything changes again. Because the systems, assumptions, and expectations built during this era would soon be challenged by new engines, new mechanics, and a very different approach to storytelling. The Black Ops 4 era and the rise of the Dark Ether saga would force Zombies Easter eggs to adapt once more. But that will be the focus of our next piece of content on Easter eggs, where we discuss the transformation of this completed formula across Black Ops 4, Black Ops Cold War, and the rest of the Dark Ether saga onwards to Black Ops 7. The focus of this video was how the formula evolved over the course of the beginnings of the Ether saga into the formula we now see as the standard. Intro cutscenes, Easter egg bosses, outro cutscenes. Let us know your thoughts down below. Do you feel I missed a giant innovation in Quest somewhere? I tried to cram in as much as I possibly could, and this video has still taken so long to make, and is such a long video. Recording this video, I know there are different tidbits I've missed from different Easter eggs that are important, but we would be here for hours and hours and hours if I truly discussed everything. What quest was your first one, and what is your favourite? When did you first get addicted to completing them? All of this will be very helpful in writing our part 2, and let us know your thoughts about future content as well, like Black Ops 4's, Cold War's, and Black Ops 7's Easter eggs. All that information will be invaluable, and if I see an interesting point raised, I will shout it out in the next part and mention it. Part 2 will be linked on screen and in the description once it is live, but for now, thank you for watching the video. Make sure to subscribe if you're not here for the latest and greatest Call of Duty news information. So anyways, thank you for watching, and I'll see you with plenty more Easter egg videos to come. Bye.